So welcome to the second session of this course on Four Paths to Awaken a Kind Heart. And this one will mostly be dealing with immeasurable love. Let's start this session as we did the earlier session with the recitation of these four immeasurable thoughts. Let me pull that up on the screen and we'll do that together. So let's begin with immeasurable equanimity. And again, we've had the teachings on equanimity now. So maybe after we finish this, we'll just pause for a little bit longer time and visualize all sentient beings surrounding you. And you can use that idea of you being in your theater and you're up on the stage, it's your show, but we divide naturally beings into those three categories. What we're trying to equalize here is our attitude towards them to make sure that we don't deny any of those beings because we see them as all worthy of our regard. And so we'll pause after that and then we'll go through the other ones a little more quickly and just pause after each of those very briefly to meditate on the other ones. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May they abide in equanimity. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. Please, Guru Deity, grant me blessings to be able to do this. So again, we can recall how the impermanence of all of this, that the way beings are relating to you right now could change even within this lifetime, and certainly has changed over lifetimes. We can recall that those beings that we see as friends, enemies, strangers, individually in those categories, others may see differently. Their relationships may be very different. So why are we basing our attitudes towards them on our own relationship? And then finally, we can also examine how these beings are all the same in their fundamental desire for happiness, to be free from suffering, the same in terms of them both possessing both positive and negative qualities, and the same in each of them having the potential to awaken fully. So then just reflect on any or all of those for just another minute or so, trying to bring the same attitude to every being within these three groups. And then, having equalized our mind towards all of these beings, let's generate immeasurable love with the 4 lines for that. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. May they have happiness and its causes. I myself will cause them to have happiness and its causes. Please, Guru Deity, grant me blessings to be able to do this. And then on to immeasurable compassion. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free of suffering and its causes. I myself will cause them to be free of suffering and its causes. Please, Guru Deity, grant me blessings to be able to do this. And then immeasurable joy. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were never separated from the happiness of higher rebirth and liberation. May they never be separated from these. I myself will cause them to never be separated from these. Please, Guru Deity, grant me blessings to be able to do this. Then let's do the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, once in English, twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodong soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi daki chanyan gi pe sonam gi dola penchir sangye drupar shok. Sangye chodong soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi daki chanyan gi pe sanam gi dola penchir sangye drupar shok. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back into the teachings. I realized during the break that there was one more slide that I wanted to cover in regard to equanimity. So let me do that first. And then I will go on to talk a little bit about immeasurable love. So for each of these four immeasurables, I found this in a couple of places. One is in a book that Alan Wallace wrote about the four immeasurables. And then the other one is in Thupten Jinpa's book, Fearless Heart. He talks briefly about the four immeasurables. And for each of them, and I think Venerable Pema Chodron in some of her teachings, she mentions these, what are called the far enemies, which are the things that are, completely opposed to that state of mind. And then what are called the near enemies. Well, what's the near enemy? The near enemy are those things that could be confused for it, that maybe have a flavor that is a little bit similar. And so we could fall into an error by thinking that we've achieved it when we're actually in a different state of mind that is opposed to it, that isn't actually in line with it. So the far enemies, of course, for this mind of equanimity are generally set out as attachment or greed, the kind of response that we have again to our friends that is problematic. Aversion or anger, and then finally prejudice or bias, any prejudice or bias. They don't generally put indifference on there. I don't know why, but nonetheless, that's included within any prejudice or bias, I suppose. And I suppose you could probably lump the first two into prejudice or bias. So those are obviously showing when we don't have equanimity, when we have some regard for people that varies depending upon how we feel about them and their category. Again, we are not going to pay the same attention to everybody, but it's how we think about them, what our attitude is. So if we have any attitude that is together with these delusions and having any bias, then that would be the exact opposite of the mind of equanimity. The near enemy is what we spoke to earlier, that this indifference or apathy. And this is a tricky one because, again, sometimes we have that feeling, and it was a bit of what Heather's question was too, of kind of bringing things to a neutral state, that we almost think that there's not supposed to be any charge then behind how we are looking at others, that it becomes kind of a blank slate, sort of blah, with regard to anyone that we meet. And that's not the goal of equanimity either. The goal of equanimity is to heighten everybody to a level of attention and care and regard that we can embrace them all equally, because it's the foundation upon which we will then go on to develop the following immeasurables. So it's not to be seen again as just a sort of blank, indifferent feeling. It's going to actually mean a feeling of kind of opening our hearts to everyone. I think that was even mentioned in one of the quotes that I shared, so that we're not blocking anyone out of our hearts. And of course, if we look at our minds right now, no doubt that is a large part of what we do, especially with those difficult people, as we talked about towards the end of this morning, that there are people who are just going to be really challenging for us. And it may look very strange for us to even, when we talk to other people, to say that we're embracing them with an equal regard, with a mind of equanimity. But if it's based on those fundamental truths that we talked about and that we're part of equalizing the mind here, recognizing that every being is the same in their basic desires and wants, realizing that every one of them has some measure of good qualities and bad qualities, sometimes again heavier skewed towards the bad, but nonetheless they still have some good qualities within them, and that they have Buddha nature. Then they have a potential to achieve the same state that we're trying to achieve. So, in this way, we can see them all as having some ability to be seen through that lens and not, again, divorced from our heart, taken away from the scope of our ensuing motivations of love and compassion and so on. And again, this is a necessary step when it comes to bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is the mind that has to embrace the welfare of all beings. Every single being without exception is included in that. And if we don't have all those beings included, there's no way our bodhicitta could be complete. So are there any questions, final questions or comments on equanimity? Anyone have anything else they'd like to share?
I was just going to share very briefly that I had a real-time example of the rotating categories. You were answering my questions in the earlier session, and the man that I'm renting this place from was calling to me. And I was very irritated that he was calling to me because my bedroom has been baking hot, and I'm mad that I'm paying for the privilege of laying here in a pool of sweat. And, so I was just very irritated. And I kind of brushed him away and said I'd get to him during the break. Well, he was interrupting me because he found a friend to come help install a window air conditioning unit today. So he very quickly went from the fifth row to very front row immediately. So it just felt very relevant, and I thought it was worth sharing that.
Isn't it interesting how when, that happens, all of a sudden we find, oh, they're trying to help us, not hinder us. So yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing that, Heather. Well, I'm glad you're getting an air conditioning unit. It's another hot day here. They keep forecasting like these hot days, and I've had enough of hot days. Yeah, I don't have any air conditioning, so I'm kind of dealing with fans and other ways of trying to stay cool. But anyway, so thanks for sharing. Yeah. Any other comments on equanimity? I do really want to emphasize how important it is. Yeah, Jackie. Let me unmute you.
It's not a comment as much as seeking the classic advice again about caregivers, mothers, when we have our children, our people, and we need to take care of. You put the three in front of me, and each one, I have a whole elaboration of compositional factors and all those things that don't make them equal. And here I am, basically, I care about all of them, and yet it's a daily challenge. What do you say to make sure you're being equal with the three?
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's just the challenge of continuing to work with that all the time. Just to be open to the reality that we are still going to have some level of bias that we need to be attentive to, and we need to try to keep that in check and to diminish that over time. The wonder of the Buddha's teachings is that they work, but they don't work immediately. So for some teachings you can apply and have like a little bit of a shift right away, which is good, but to get the full shift, to get to a place where we can meet everybody with equanimity. And then, of course, the next two steps of meeting everybody with loving kindness and with compassion, I mean, these are even bigger in terms of, how do we muster up that state of mind with everyone that we meet, with every being that we see. So, yeah, slowly, just acknowledge, it's going to say somewhere. Yeah.
Well, yes, of course. And what do you say to people? Most of us want to have, like mothers want to have that, but we want to. And we would even claim that we love all our children equal. How many mothers try to say that?
Sure.
But if the expectation is you're really just, unless you work on it consciously, not able to love people equally. And that's a natural state. You have to just work with it, isn't it? Wouldn't that be true?
I mean, again, I wouldn't want to deny the possibility, though, that we could advance it to that degree. I mean, where I don't think that, I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, obviously, he talks very fondly about the affection that he had for his mother. He never had children himself, so he wasn't in the position you're speaking to, Jackie. But I'm sure that, um, he might have had greater affection, but it doesn't change the love, the depth of love that I think he would have for any being. And he speaks to that, that he tries to see every being that he meets through that lens of this is somebody very dear and precious to me, and what have you. I mean, equal. I think it's hard to make sure that everything is exactly equal, but nonetheless, if we really work with these teachings, I think we can have that same mind that we're bringing to anyone that we meet. And we might still, again, as you were pointing out, have some slight biases that manifest, even like His Holiness's would towards his own mother. But I don't know. I don't think that if they don't cause problems, then maybe that isn't as important to address as much as making sure we open our hearts to all the other people. We already have our hearts wide open to most of the people in those 2 front rows or 3 front rows, however many front rows we have. But then, making sure that we're not closing our heart to everyone else. That's the bigger challenge, perhaps. And then, yeah.
The best I can hope for, what do you think? Sometimes you just have to fake it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That as long as they don't have the perspective that one is so solely favored over another one,
Yeah.
that's a faking
Yeah.
situation, but it works as a
Yeah.
skill means, isn't it? I mean, you try, one tries.
Absolutely. And I think it manifests, I'm sure, in terms of how you relate to them and making sure that they're all seen as very important and very
Yeah.
dear to you. So, and I won't tell them which one is your favorite. So,
Yeah, I think it's obvious, but sometimes I feel like I'm being a little too obvious about it, and then I have to back off.
yeah, I mean, I have 2 siblings, and I think there's a little bit of that rivalry there about, who gets most of mom's attention,
Right.
or who does mom think the best of is maybe the better way to put it. No,
Thank
Well,
you.
Michelle,
once I figured out that all mine irritate me equally, it's like, oh, I could just love them all equally.
That's right.
yeah, that often comes with it too.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other comments or questions? These are great. It's a challenging state of mind. As I was saying just before Jackie's question, I think it is really important that we spend a lot of time on equanimity. When we get to the final part of this course tomorrow, as I mentioned before, equanimity is the foundation upon which the whole process of developing bodhicitta is based. Because if we don't sort of check up what our attitudes are towards various people, then again, it does act as a block, becomes an obstacle to opening our heart with the following, thoughts of love and compassion and so on. So let's go ahead and get into immeasurable love. This is the second of these. Pull up the slides. We can just take a look. For each of these, I just simply repeated the quote that is at the top of that section in your little handout. So for immeasurable love, Kathleen MacDonald says that the desire for happiness unites all beings, human and non-human. Feeling love for others means acknowledging this desire, respecting it, and doing what we can to fulfill it. This kind of love is sometimes called loving kindness, to distinguish it from love that is mixed with lust or selfish attachment. Loving kindness is pure, unselfish, and unconditional. Immeasurable love means wishing all beings to have happiness and its causes. So it's kind of taking that thought of loving kindness that is unconditional, and it's really not, again, going to get too caught up in who this person is manifesting as, what actions they're doing, and so on, but seeing them as simply a being who wants to be happy, and from that vantage point can be wished happiness and the causes of happiness. We start getting into these thoughts when we have them towards those who are, difficult for us. It actually makes a lot of sense to cultivate these ideas. And just in the same way that I've been mentioning that Rinpoche at the end of his teachings at the last Light of the Path retreat in 2017 would include Donald Trump in the scope of his wish for beings to cultivate bodhicitta. And it's the same thing here with regard to love and compassion that feed into our bodhicitta, is that there would be nothing better for those people who are manifesting as enemies than for them to have happiness and its causes. If they were genuinely, truly happy, and if they also had freedom from all of their suffering and difficulties, then they would be very different people. They wouldn't be manifesting in the way that they are. So this might be another thing that can be used in terms of when we talk to other people about these sorts of techniques that we're using, is that if we really ideally want that person to be a better person, then we want them to be happy. We want them to not suffer. And to get to that place, of course, we have to see them with some measure of equanimity. We have to be able to include them in the scope of these sorts of thoughts. So this is the importance of these, is that they begin to really put beings in their more ultimate state of well-being. Now, again, it doesn't mean that as we get into this, we'll talk about, happiness and what's the real measure of happiness. It doesn't mean that we don't want temporal happiness for others at all, because obviously we see from our own vantage point how to some degree we do have to have some measure of temporal happiness. We do need to have enough food in the fridge and enough, money in the bank and all the things that help to have a somewhat, doable life, a life that isn't without any challenges, but certainly is free of a lot of the major challenges. Imagine if we were living in a different life where we had to go to great lengths, as many people do in this world still, to just get the food to put on the table, just get fresh water to be able to drink. I mean, my gosh, there are still people in this world that don't have the basic necessities of life that we take for granted. And so again, wanting people to have temporal happiness is perfectly fine as a stepping stone to the deeper levels of happiness, because we see from the Buddhist perspective, that all of what we call temporal happiness is not really ultimately satisfying. We're going to talk about this a little bit when we get into compassion and talking about the ways that beings suffer. And one of them is that the things that they do get that give some measure of pleasure or happiness simply don't last, don't really fill the bill when it comes to it. So when we get into what we mean by happiness, when we use this phrase of loving kindness is the wish, or immeasurable love is the wish for happiness and its causes for all beings, well, then what do we really mean by that happiness? Here, I would like to share from Kathleen MacDonald's book. She talks a little bit about this, and I think it's well worth me doing a little story hour here. It won't be an hour, story minutes, on true happiness and what causes it. This is pages 24 to 25. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm just going to read a few selections. She says, in fact, there are different kinds of happiness. The experience most people consider to be happiness is more aptly called sensory pleasure. This is the pleasure we experience through our five senses: seeing attractive objects, hearing beautiful sounds, smelling nice odors, tasting delicious flavors, and feeling pleasant sensations in our body. These experiences are enjoyable, but fleeting, like a dream or a rainbow. Another kind of happiness comes from positive states of mind, such as love, compassion, faith, contentment, and gratitude, and from doing beneficial actions, such as helping others. This happiness, which we could call spiritual happiness, or I might even refer to it as a more ultimate happiness, is more pure and stable. Check it out for yourself. What is more rewarding? Buying some new toy for yourself or giving a gift to someone else? Some people might answer, well, buying a toy for myself is always more enjoyable. But no, most of us do have that experience that it is better to give than to receive, that we really enjoy putting a smile on someone else's face by offering them something, by helping them with some task, by getting them an air conditioning unit for their window. And so this is, kind of, again, we do see that those forms of what we might call the spiritual happiness that are generated from positive emotions and positive actions are more reliable. And they do have a deeper nature. And it's not that they're going to last forever either, necessarily. We have to develop those to an even greater degree to have that experience. But nonetheless, we do see that they're a very different form of happiness. And then a little bit later, she goes on to say, it is also important to accept that not only does everyone want to be happy, But everyone deserves to be happy. It is our right as beings. We should be happy. We sometimes feel that we do not deserve happiness because we hurt someone or because a loved one is suffering. We think, how can I be happy when my friend is suffering? And then she goes on to talk about how that's maybe a bit of a skewed attitude and we need to correct that. Shouldn't beat ourselves up. We should be much more positive and cheerful and so on. But then she says another misconception about the wish for happiness is that it is selfish and greedy, something we should give up. This also is not correct. There is nothing wrong with wanting happiness, but where we often go wrong is the kind of happiness we want and what we do to get it. Seeking only that first kind of happiness may bring some short-term happiness, but in the long run leads to problems and dissatisfaction. Of course, this is the truth that the Buddha taught about the nature of those experiences. Furthermore, if in our pursuit of happiness we are self-obsessed and unethical, we can do a lot of damage to ourselves and others and end up with more suffering than happiness. On the other hand, if we are more interested in the second kind of happiness and use ethical, skillful means to achieve it, there's no harm done, and everyone will benefit. Therefore, in addition to wishing others to be happy, we also wish them to have the causes of happiness, positive attitudes such as compassion, kindness, and wisdom, and positive actions such as practicing giving, ethics, and patience. So the idea here is that when we talk about this concept of wishing others to have happiness and its causes, we want to think as far as we can and as deep as we can with this. Sometimes it's nice just to wish people to have the basic necessities and the simple things in life that will be of some benefit in the moment. But it's much more fulfilling for everyone involved if we actually are wishing for people to have the deeper happiness that comes from adopting a more ethical life, as she says, living one's life from these places of compassion, loving kindness, and so on, all the positive qualities that the Buddha teaches. This is going to lead to much greater happiness and well-being. Lama Zopa Rinpoche often calls this the happiness of Dharma. Of course, we're not trying to pigeonhole just Buddhist Dharma. There are a lot of spiritual traditions and even just good, ways of living one's life in the human world that embody so many of these qualities of generosity, gratitude, and so on. So it's really important that we just embrace that idea that there is a happiness that we can achieve by adopting more stable and other focused mindsets. And this is, of course, what we're trying to do especially through these two of loving kindness and compassion. But here we're focusing on granting beings and helping beings to have happiness. So we want them to have the best possible happiness. And again, when we are thinking about, I mentioned earlier how some of these thoughts towards our enemies might be some of the best things for them. If we only wanted our enemies to have temporal happiness, well, then that might mean, again, they could do an awful lot of things to acquire all the various stuff that we're wishing them to have. But if we wish for them to have this deeper level of well-being, this is really our goal, and this is really our what we aspire towards. Wouldn't it be wonderful if all beings lived from that place of true, genuine happiness? Yeah, knowing that the sources of all of that are within ourselves, that they're not derived from having all our toys and gadgets and beautiful things in our lives, but rather they come from an inner peace, an inner well-being that we all can cultivate. So this is the idea behind this, is that when we get into love and loving kindness and wishing for others to have happiness and its causes, we want to understand these different dimensions of happiness, not to exclude one to the other, but to incorporate both, but with the primary aim being that we want beings to have a deeper sense of well-being and happiness. One thing that's often talked about here, maybe I'll just touch on it briefly, are some of the benefits of love. There are 8 benefits that are often set out in the Lamrim texts. There's a little verse that comes from Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. He says the first 3 are deities and men come to love you and protect you. So deities come to love you and protect you, and men come to love you and protect you. I know somehow they come to love you and then they both together protect you. So we again, these are just the traditional ways that these are set out. I'm just throwing this out there that you sort of please others by virtue of having loving kindness, and then they love you in turn and come to protect you. Whether it be deities, gods, or what have you, it isn't as important. But the idea is that we create that type of karma, that type of energy. equanimity. The fourth one is that you will be happy. And the fifth is that you will have much physical pleasure as well, kind of general well-being. And of course, this makes sense karmically as well. The more that you are practicing wishing others to have happiness and place them in happiness, the more that that becomes a product that you experience. The happiness that you will have from generating that state of mind, as well as the happiness that it happens karmically from that, will be felt. It's a very happy mind to have a mind of loving kindness. And of course, the physical pleasure comes along with it, meaning that you will have all your necessities, resources, things that will satisfy you physically as well as mentally. A sixth benefit is that poison and weapons cannot harm you. I don't know if we want to put that to the test. It's nice to, believe that that will happen, but, I don't know. I mean, we'll see if that can happen over time. But, this once more, karmically, we see that this makes sense. If we are cultivating loving kindness towards every being that we meet. In fact, I think it was Richard Gere in one of the Discovering Buddhism little videos that they do for that series. It was the one on bodhicitta, I think, where he says he practiced for a while, having that be his first thought of may you be happy. When he would meet any being, don't get into the other judgment about who this is and what do they want from me and what's going on. Just have that thought naturally arise every time you see somebody of may you be happy. And of course you could add, and have the causes of happiness. But if that's your initial thought towards everybody, then yeah, these sorts of malevolent forces, poisons, weapons, people doing things to harm you, this won't happen. The seventh one is that you attain your goals without much effort. Again, loving kindness does sort of moisten the mind to such a great degree that it helps our bodhicitta to grow, helps us to then have ease with regard to how we are practicing the Dharma. So hopefully we can attain the goals that we seek without it being too difficult. And then, of course, you will be born in the Brahma realms. Actually, this is why I didn't mention this earlier, but these four immeasurables, when they're practiced in the Pali tradition, they're often called the four Brahma abodes. Brahmas are these gods of the God realms, not the God realms that are in the desire realm, but the gods of the form realm, I think, is where they're in one of those realms. I think the first form realm. But anyway, it's said that if you meditate on these four immeasurables, you create the causes to be reborn in these beautiful sort of paradises with these other gods, these Brahma gods. And so the other allusion to this, though, when it says be reborn in the Brahma realms, is that the final Brahma, the sort of final state, if you will, as it's called, is the highest state of Buddhahood, which is, of course, when we are able to practice all the way to achieving that. So I don't know, I thought I would share those, but there's obviously many other benefits that we see in our everyday life if we practice loving kindness towards others. And some of these Venerable Kathleen MacDonald, Sangye Kadro, pointed out in her text, your mind will be happy and you will be more physically healthy. You will be more loved, helped, and protected by others. You will sleep better at night, have more pleasant dreams, and wake up more refreshed. Your appearance will be more radiant, smiling and relaxed, and you will be able to communicate more easily with others. Your mind will be more serene and easily concentrated, and you will more effortlessly accomplish your aims. You will die unconfused. You will die with a very clear mind. So these are the sorts of things that she, sets out that I think we can also see as karmic effects of practicing loving kindness. So with equanimity, you got the disadvantages of not having a mind of equanimity. Here you get the benefits of having a mind of love. So you get some of that positive advertising. So let me see if there's, I don't know if I need to say much more in introducing, loving kindness and love. Let's go ahead and go into the instructions that are on the sheet for this that you all have. This is page 2 of that, where we go into immeasurable love. So that was the quote from Kathleen MacDonald. Somewhat similar to what we did with equanimity, we're going to work with both immeasurable love and immeasurable compassion by generating these mindsets towards oneself first. Now, in the traditional teachings, they do certainly encourage people to have self-compassion and self-love and what have you, but maybe the attention isn't quite as great in the traditional Tibetan texts as what we tend to put when we teach this in the West. And that's because I think to a large degree we have to admit that, in the West we do have a lot of problems with kind of not regarding ourselves in the greatest light, right? His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself, there's a story that he met with Western Buddhist teachers back in the 90s, I think it was. This was recounted in a book called Healing Emotions, I think, is where I read it. But I'd heard about it elsewhere as well, because I think Venerable Tipton Chodron was there. Sharon Salzberg was there. She's the one who actually brought up this question to His Holiness. And she said, Your Holiness, as teachers in the West, we ourselves, and we run across this, all the time, that students have so much hatred for themselves, so much denigration of themselves. How do we work with this in the West? And His Holiness was just like shocked to hear this. He said, what do you mean they don't love themselves? Of course they love themselves, because from the traditional Tibetan point of view, there's this self-centeredness, self-cherishing that we spoke to earlier in the week. That is sort of our guiding principle, that we take care of ourselves to the exclusion of others, that we love ourselves more than we love others. And yet, that assumption doesn't always hold true. There are a lot of people in the West who very much struggle with self-love and with treating themselves well. And self-compassion, of course, is the companion that we'll get into tomorrow morning when we talk about immeasurable compassion. But I think it is important that we emphasize this work. Now, a lot of people may feel like they don't need to do that work. They may, I love myself fine. I love myself fine. I have lots of compassion for myself. But it's worthwhile to do the exercises anyway, even if you feel that that's the case. Because sometimes we may also have our blind spots and not really see how much we do tend to neglect some of our own things that would be useful for us, beneficial for us. There's, of course, a lot of self-indulgence that we do in terms of self-love and what have you that may not be the most ideal thing for us. But a lot of what we need to do to really genuinely care for ourselves, we're missing out on, because we don't have that attitude. We don't grow up with that attitude being reinforced a lot. Now, on the other hand, people do have a pretty high regard for caring for others. And this is why a lot of people end up in that place of becoming caregivers, but they never really learn how to take care of themselves. They just think that their job is to care for others. And so self-love and self-compassion are very much a part of making sure that we do that work most effectively, because we've already worked on ourselves and generated these attitudes towards ourselves. Then there is a deeper way that they will actually manifest in terms of our caring for others. So I don't think it's in any way selfish. I've heard some Buddhist teachers, talk to this in maybe ways that I would find questionable. But I think, again, the traditional teachings do talk about it here and there. It's just not emphasized as much. But I really firmly believe that we have to learn how to love ourselves and care for ourselves. And I do see many people in my profession as a Buddhist teacher who struggle with that, and who really have a very low opinion of themselves, a very low self-esteem. And so, again, these practices of self-love and self-compassion can begin to heal some of that and help people to feel much better about themselves, and therefore feel much better about what they have to offer to others and how they can help others. So anyway, that's enough of my little soapbox on that. Let's go into the first part of this practice then, which is cultivating love for oneself. Consider how you are the same as all beings in wanting to be happy and to have the causes of happiness. And again, we might grow up, many of us, with the idea that our happiness is not as important as other people's happiness. Maybe we get the opposite. Maybe we get inflated in our own sense of taking care of ourselves, and it becomes problematic in that way. But we simply want to recognize, in the same way that we saw this as part of our equanimity, that there's no difference between myself and others, to make sure that I'm not neglecting myself in the process, especially of this Mahayana path that becomes so other-centric, to make sure that we are acknowledging that we're part of all beings wanting to be happy, all beings wanting the causes of happiness. And then we begin to generate an attitude of loving kindness for ourselves, remembering the following: to first accept yourself as you are, with all your present faults and shortcomings. Again, doesn't mean that we can't do better, doesn't mean that we can't get rid of our faults and we can't address them. It just means that we're going to accept ourselves completely, in the same way that we will want to eventually, turn this practice towards others, to accept them as total beings that have, the bad parts, the good parts, the indifferent parts. We're just going to take the whole package and accept ourselves as we are in the same way that we're going to want to do that for others. Be a friend to yourself, not being angry or frustrated that you aren't the person you'd ideally like to be. If you have a real genuine friend, that friend doesn't come up to you and, lay all kinds of judgment and stuff on you. They accept you for who you are, and kind of embrace all of the totality of your being. We have to learn to have that self-acceptance as well. And once more, this isn't meant to induce any sense of complacency. The spiritual path is obviously one where we keep moving in an upward direction. We might go all over the place. There's that little cartoon about how I envision people's spiritual paths and how I see my own, and it's like all over the place. But it's acknowledging that we are going to be on our own road going in this direction, but we have to embrace ourselves where we are. Start where we are with accepting that we have faults, we have difficulties, we have challenges, but we're going to accept ourselves as worthy objects of our love. Not kind of project on ourselves that we're supposed to be something else. We're supposed to be a better version of ourselves or something. The third step might be, again, and you can work with these different time, different tension, depending upon where you see the effects from these. Practice all of them initially and then see if you're gaining any effect from them. And then maybe you might find that one works better than the other, or one is more important than the other. The third is to acknowledge your potential to change and grow, to experience greater happiness, peace, and positive qualities. And of course, that means bringing to mind that we do all have Buddha nature. You have Buddha nature. Every one of us has Buddha nature. And we all, therefore, have the potential to change our minds, to develop, to experience even greater and greater happiness, to become more loving, more kind, more patient, more generous, more everything, wise. And then finally, give yourself the space to fulfill that potential, truly wishing yourself to be happy. Just kind of sitting in the space of acknowledging that we can do better, having accepted ourselves as we are, having developed a friendly attitude towards ourselves, really wanting to be kind of the nurturing, dear friend that we see in others. And we have the potential to grow, to change. So these are the sorts of thoughts that really feed into this and that really make this effective. I mean, just saying be loving towards yourself might not be enough for a lot of people. They really need to start with some acceptance and so on, all these various steps. Having done all of that, then we go on to the actual sort of practice of generating thoughts of loving kindness for ourselves. It says there on the third bullet point, then hold that wish in the space of thoughts such as, may I be happy, may I be safe, free from harm and danger. May I have all that I need to be truly happy, peaceful, and satisfied. May all my thoughts and actions be positive and all my experiences good. There's nothing wrong in wanting you to have all of this. I know sometimes when we hear these sorts of thoughts, these affirmations in a sense of what we want for ourselves, we think, oh my God, that sounds so selfish for me to just like be focused on me having all of this stuff. But this is how we train our minds to wish that for others. If we haven't wished that for ourselves, then I think there is a gap between our love and what we are generating for others. It's not as solid as what we would like it to be. Now, again, that language that was on that sheet is totally changeable. These are examples of thoughts. And of course, in the Pali tradition, in the Theravadan schools of Buddhism, this is usually what that's the form of their sort of metta meditation. Metta is the word for loving kindness in the Pali. And so they will practice metta meditation by having those thoughts initially towards oneself, wishing for, may I be happy, may I have the causes of happiness, and so on. And then beginning to extend it out, and we're going to go into that next. But just know that those sorts of thoughts, they're falling into that second category. Remember, we have the four that are, each of these are about. So for loving kindness or love, immeasurable love, we have how wonderful it would be. And then we have may they, and then we have I myself will, and then we have please bless me to be able to do that. And so that's kind of falling into, again, that second category that is more of a prayer. But nonetheless, there's nothing wrong with hanging out there, especially with regard to ourselves. May I have that? May this actually come to pass. May I have ease and well-being. May I be safe from danger and have good health and so on. Nothing wrong with wanting these, especially when we're doing this in the context of Mahayana motivation, in the context of wanting ourselves to eventually be of great benefit to others as well. So again, these are the sorts of thoughts that are worthwhile. But if you're having a particular problem going on, then it's fine to be very specific in addressing that. Say you're having a really difficult relationship issue, manifesting. There's nothing wrong with saying, may I find, ease in my relationship with so-and-so. May I learn to, have the ability to communicate more effectively with them and be happy and content with them and whatever. I mean, there's nothing wrong with sort of wanting yourself to address the specific things that are going on in your life through the lens of this thoughts of love towards yourself, loving kindness towards yourself. So the final little step here, imagine that the warm energy of loving kindness in your heart radiates out, gradually filling your body and mind, and you become suffused with happiness and its causes. This is just a little meditation. I don't even remember the source of all this. I did this quite a few years ago in Santa Fe here. And I'm guessing that I got some of this perhaps from even Sharon Salzberg's book, Loving Kindness. Because again, in the Mahayana tradition, they maybe don't talk quite as much about self-love. They talk about self-compassion here and there, but not maybe even as much too as other traditions do. But I think it is a very important step to initially focus on oneself and generate these thoughts. Let's go on then to cultivating love for friends, strangers, and enemies. Of course, we just talked about these three categories as part of our equanimity meditation, and there's nothing wrong with continuing to use these three categories. In fact, most of the traditional texts suggest that you do so. Now, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, sometimes in his meditations, he might say, start with, beings of the lower realms and generate love and compassion for them, and then go on. And it becomes a bit, general. And there's nothing wrong with doing those sort of general meditations where I'm thinking about all the animals in this world or all the human beings in this world. Lama Tsongkhapa, though, points out the problem is that if we don't think quite specifically about individuals, when we meet with individuals, although we've done a general meditation, we might still have problems with them. We might still have issues with them that we haven't resolved. So that's why it is important to use the beings who are in your theater that you're aware of. Again, for strangers, we will be bringing to mind people who we don't know so well. That's part of them being strangers. But for the friends and the difficult people, the enemies, it's really important that you work with individuals so that you develop an attitude of loving kindness that starts with the people who you do know and then can be extended out to other beings. So the general methodology is to begin with friends, to begin with the people who are very dear to us. Why? Because our heart naturally opens to them. We do care about them in that way. We do want them to be happy. That's why we're in some form of a relationship with them. Again, it might be different degrees depending upon which child it is, or depending upon which, that person at work and how much you like them or whatever. You know them all, but maybe some of them are closer to you than others. But nonetheless, start with the people who you feel the closest to. And that's going to be one or more of your friends who you feel, you would do anything for, that you really genuinely love and care about them without any pause. You would do whatever it takes to help them. And that's, the measure to some degree of what you want to have for all beings, is a loving attitude that would be there equally with regard to all of them. Now, we can't be there physically for every one of them, but we want to cultivate the attitude. And then when we do get challenged and somebody does need our help and we are there, we will be more inclined to be a benefit at that time. But the whole point of this is to change once more our thoughts, our attitudes, so that we can start with compassion, with loving kindness towards the people who we already feel some measure of that, and begin to bring everyone else into the fold, so that they all are objects of that same type of, that same degree of loving kindness. So let's look at what I put together here for this. It's a little more involved. So we start with friends, as it says there, then move on to strangers or neutral people, and finally work with enemies, those with whom we have a difficult relationship. Initially, it's good to recall the meditation on equanimity to generate an even-mindedness towards all three categories. So we might do a visualization as we did of like thinking of our friends, dear ones in the space with us, and then we can think about enemies also there in the space in front of us, you know, and then we can think about all the strangers filling out all of space, all those beings that we don't know, and generate an equal regard for every one of them first through the contemplations that we went through this morning. Then begin to extend loving kindness to each of the three groups consecutively. Again, we begin with friends. There's nothing wrong with just staying with friends for a while. After you've worked with yourself, turn your attention to your dearest friend. Begin with that person, and then move on to the next person who is dear to you, and so on, bringing them all, as I said, sort of into the fold of experiencing that loving kindness from you. Now, how we actually get to doing that once more involves recalling something that will help us to feel that sense of affection for them. We're going to see this when we go through the instructions on generating bodhicitta. But one of the ways that we feel affection for other beings is when we recall the kindness that they've shown us. Why are all those people in the front row highlighted so much and, you know, the object of so much of our attention and so on? Because they have shown us kindness that's quite evident to us. This is what we call sort of our direct and intentional kindness. The people who are in your life who do things directly for you, they're not doing it by way of some conduit that eventually gets to you, and they're doing it with that strong intention of benefiting you, you know, because they love you, because they care about you, because there's some affection that's already there. So again, in order to kind of have that for more beings than just the two front rows or three front rows or whatever, that where we've got all of those, you know, wonderful dear people that we pay attention to, we have to recall their kindness as well, which means that we do have to start looking at what we mean by kindness and perhaps even redefining what we mean by kindness so that it can accommodate everyone in the theater, because we don't want to close our hearts to anyone else that's there. Again, even though we've generated the mind of equanimity, there can still be some obstacles because we don't feel so close, you know, to those people that we consider to be enemies. You know, if I had a choice between going out to dinner with a dear friend who I love and care about and somebody who I can't stand, I mean, the choice would be obvious, right? You go, thank you very much, but you know, I really love this person and enjoy that person. I'd much rather be there. I'm still going to have, even if I've got a mind of equanimity and I think that that person who I can't stand still deserves happiness and blah, 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 all the various thoughts that feed into it, I'm still going to have some aversion to them that's kind of subtle because I haven't really acknowledged the kindness that that being offers me. And this is where, once more, we are going to have to redefine kindness. I had one student when I first taught this in Santa Fe who really objected to this idea of redefining kindness. And again, I'm not trying to like appropriate kindness in a Buddhist context and make it have only that meaning. We can use the meaning of kindness as it is in society. Most people see kindness as something that is a direct, intentional act that is done for somebody. Even when we say random acts of kindness, it's still something that is, you know, done to benefit somebody. They might not know that person, might not know much about them, but they're direct actions of benefit that are done with that intention. Let's redefine kindness, though, because kindness is, in that regard, seen from the point of view of the person who is bestowing that. Let's look at it from the point of view of the person who is receiving that. And that's the shift that we want to go through in terms of how we can begin to open our hearts to a wider array of beings, because we see that every single being, in fact, can be seen as having shown us kindness, extended us kindness in one way or another. You know, they're not all giving you birthday gifts. Not everyone on the planet and every animal, you know, is giving you a birthday gift and cares about you to that degree. But every being is involved in your welfare. From the point of view of receiving kindness, if we define it that way, and receiving benefit from others, we actually, there's no end to what we receive from other beings. Other beings are actually all incredibly kind. So this is an important part of this, and what I've done for this is I put together a whole little appendix. It's mentioned here right on the screen in front of you, or an addendum. Addendum 1, points for meditation on the kindness of all beings. Let's go to that. That involves me getting to the right page here. There it is, addendum 1. So I don't remember, is that, what page is that? It's page 8 of the handout that you've been sent. So in this meditation, as it says here, we can gain an appreciation for the kindness of every living being by thinking about the direct and indirect, as well as the intentional and unintentional kindness that we experience from the 3 categories of beings, from friends, from difficult people, and from strangers. So the very first one, meditate on the kindness of those who are your friends and loved ones. Not a big deal, right? Because they're intentionally and directly kind to us. These are the people who express that, and it should be easy to recognize and appreciate them. Point B, think about those who have in the past and currently do contribute to your welfare quite directly. Your parents, siblings, grandparents, partner or spouse, children, friends, pets, anyone close to you. Think about how you benefit from what they do for you directly and intentionally. And that's how they mainly manifest in our lives, right? Those front row people, they are the people who are doing that for us. They're scratching our back. They're taking care of us. They're giving us gifts. They're, attending to us, caring for us. So feel a deep appreciation for the kindness that you receive from these dear ones in your life. And as I said, you can do it in a very general way around all of those people. Maybe visualize everyone who you consider to be a friend. I don't know, that's kind of challenging for some people. But have at least enough in the room, if you will, that you can have that awareness. But you can also work with individuals. I mentioned this just a few minutes ago. Maybe start with the person who you feel the closest to. So you've already worked on generating loving kindness for yourself. Now you're going to work with that person. It's going to be very easy to think of them through the lens of their kindness to you because they've been very directly and intentionally kind. And begin to then generate the thoughts of loving kindness in response to them having done this for you. The same sorts of thoughts that we said earlier, you want to generate those for them. May you be well and happy. May you have happiness and its causes and so on. There's nothing, again, this is the first step, is to work with those that it's quite easy to do. Then bring in the next person who's next on the list in terms of their proximity to you and your feelings of closeness to them, and try to bring them to the same level as the person you started with. Then bring in the third person and bring them to the same level, and work with that enough so that you start feeling that any one of those people in that group of friends you could treat in the same way in terms of really genuinely wanting them to be happy and to have the causes of happiness because you feel closeness to them due to the kindness they've shown you. So again, this one isn't such a mystery because this is, if it stopped there, we'd all be happy, right? Because we don't have to generate all the challenging thoughts towards those who have been difficult in our lives. So that's where we go to in the third point. The next point, again, in terms of the order that you were encouraged to work with, is to, after we feel quite comfortable with friends, bring in the strangers, all the people in the dark of the theater. Start turning on the house lights, make sure that you can see that all those people are in your theater too. In this category of strangers are mostly those who are indirectly and usually unintentionally kind to us. As it's, well, let me go through the next point and then I'll talk about this a little more. This includes those, whether human beings or animals, who help us to have all the possessions we use and enjoy, such as the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, the cars we drive, the houses we live in, and so forth. So when I was saying, that they aren't intentional in this, it's not that, again, the person who was living in some country who sewed this shirt, because very few things are made in the United States anymore, but there was somebody involved in all this. There was fabric and, all of this happening. But the person who's like doing the final work on this shirt to put all the buttons on or to whatever, get it all pressed and ready to, they don't say, oh, good, I can't wait till Don gets this shirt and how much he's going to enjoy this shirt and he'll be able to teach in this shirt and blah, 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 blah. They don't have that intention. But I can nonetheless still see it as an act of kindness because they are benefiting me, albeit indirectly and unintentionally, to have the various things that I have, to be able to wear a shirt and to take, have food on my table. And as I was mentioning earlier, I think this pandemic has shown us the value of all those people in our lives that keep doing all the things that keep us all surviving, keep us all with what we need to make sure that every day we can do what we need to do. So all of those people have shown you kindness. And this one is maybe a little harder to see than the first one, but it's not that hard. We can see that we benefit from this. It does become problematic though when we start thinking of it as kindness from their side, because most of those people aren't thinking necessarily, some of them might be, but most of them aren't thinking about benefiting others by doing that. They're going in and they're getting their paycheck and doing their work and happy to have a job and be able to feed their family and all the things, but they're not necessarily thinking about, I'm going in to make sure that there's food for all the other people on this planet. Now, right now, they may be because they're being highlighted as very, essential workers, the people that we need in order to keep everything running. And we are so indebted to them, particularly at this time, but we're always indebted to them. So again, we might have a hard time seeing it as kindness from their side because they might be doing it for other motivations, for their own wages and what have you. But we're looking at kindness here from the recipient's point of view. I am being benefited by these beings and the work that they're doing. Therefore, they are showing me kindness. And they might never choose to stay home and never go to work again because they are happy to get the wages they get and do what they do, to keep employed during this time. But nonetheless, if they weren't doing the work that they were doing, I wouldn't have those things in my life. I wouldn't be able to count on all of that. So this is the logic that we're going to use for strangers. And of course, when we get to the enemies, we have to stretch it a little bit more even. So again, the third point there, C, think about those who have in the past and currently do contribute to your welfare in this way. Develop a sense of genuine appreciation for the kindness that you experience from all these kind strangers who have helped you or are helping you now to have these things in your life, or will help you in the future. We depend upon, as Blanche Dubois said, the kindness of strangers, and not just in direct ways when those strangers have to, help us here or there, but in the everyday way that those strangers are involved in our welfare. Actually, let's take a little break. It's already 2:02, so I think it'd be a good time to take a break, and I need to wet my whistle here from this end. So when we come back after the short break, we will go into the third category of enemies and difficult people, and how do we adjust our view of kindness there so that we feel a closeness to those beings, wish to reciprocate to them by generating thoughts of loving kindness towards them. So I have, again, about 2:02. Let's go till 2:10. I don't think that's a problem unless people want less of a break. But I think 8 minutes, 9 or 7 minutes, whatever it's going to be when I finish talking, we'll just go with that. So 10 after 2. I'll see you then. Okay. Okay. So let's go back then to continue this way of reframing what we mean by kindness. To look here at the final one, the category of those who are difficult to, what we might call our enemies, challenging people. So again, as it says there, these are those who actually are what we often see as the opposite of kind, since they are directly and intentionally harmful to us or those that we care about through their behavior, their views, and so on. So again, it gets to be much more challenging to look at them through the lens of some measure of kindness because they are usually what we call unkind in conventional views. So yet we can still see what appears that way as a kindness, since without such challenging people in our lives, we cannot develop and strengthen our compassion, our love, our patience. I mentioned this the other night, it's just, we do need challenging situations on our spiritual path, and challenging people are a very important part of that. How can we develop a patience that embraces others through that lens of loving kindness and compassion without those difficult people in our lives? Just like you need people who are bereft of resources to practice generosity towards them, you also need people who are mean and difficult and, upsetting to us in order to work with developing the mind of patience. So think about those who have in the past and currently made your life or the lives of those you love difficult. and try to see how you could utilize what has happened as a way to develop your positive qualities, that we actually, can accomplish good things on the basis of using them as a support. Try to cultivate a sense of appreciation for this form of kindness that you can experience from all these difficult people who are the perfect opportunity for deepening your qualities. So once more, this is a very challenging way to work with those people because it's not evident. And if we told most people in the world that we're going to see our enemies as being kind, they would look at us and say, "You're crazy. These people are not kind at all." But they are a part of a process. It's giving us exactly what we need to work on the spiritual path. In that way, they're giving us some kindness that we wouldn't be able to get from other people. And we don't get, well, we did talk about earlier about even the people in our front rows, can be challenging at times. They can show us that side of themselves that it manifests as an enemy, a difficult person. By the way, I forgot to put that meditation up there on the break. I'll make sure I get it out there. And I also had one other thing that I wanted to share. So I'll get those ready tonight and put those first thing on the chat box tomorrow. But we don't get as many opportunities to practice harm from others and people doing negative things towards us as we do have people that are loving and kind towards us, or at least accepting and tolerant of us, and we experience much more of that in our lives generally. There might be the rare person who has a whole lot of challenging people in their lives, but for most of us it's actually quite rare. There's even that wonderful verse of working with thought transformation in the 8 verses where it says, whenever beings wicked in nature and overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering, whenever I see beings of that nature, may I see them, such rare ones, as dear and precious, like a precious treasure is the gist of it. That these beings are actually something that we are seeking out and very happy to find. That when we do have difficult people in our lives, they're giving us exactly the means to deepen our qualities, especially our patience, our tolerance, and of course challenge us to extend our love and our compassion to beings who are acting in ways that are contrary to that. So once more, we have to really redefine kindness here, to look at it from the point of view of seeing that you yourself will benefit from those difficult people in your life. The story goes that Lama Atisha himself, who 1,000 years ago brought the jewel of so many of these teachings into Tibet. They'd already, Tibetan Buddhism had already been there for a few centuries, but so much of the corpus of what we study in this Gelugpa tradition came from Lama Atisha's kindness. Anyway, when he came to Tibet, he didn't know what the Tibetan people were like, and he envisioned them as being a very, friendly and easygoing, people. And so he brought along this Bengali tea boy, this guy who really pushed his buttons, who just, you know, he was his own way of kind of having something in his life that would help him to do his spiritual practice, because he was worried that he was going to get to Tibet and everybody was going to be so nice, he wouldn't have anyone difficult to practice with. So he brought him along with him. I mean, how many of us would, like I was saying earlier, if I had a choice between going out to dinner with someone who I love and care about and enjoy being with and somebody who I can't stand, the choice becomes obvious. But imagine taking that somebody you can't stand on you, this amazing journey from India to Tibet, and living with them every day, day in and day out, someone who's going to push your buttons that way. Well, you have to really want something out of that, I think, to do that. And of course, what he wanted was to be able to deepen his practice of patience and tolerance. The story, of course, also goes that once he got to Tibet, he realized he didn't need to bring the Bengali tea boy, that there were plenty of people there that pushed his buttons. So this is, again, another challenge along the path, is to see beings through the lens of their kindness, because this is how we feel close to them. This is how we actually generate thoughts of loving kindness towards them. So in the conclusion here, it says, in this way, there are no beings who cannot be seen as kind, for every one of them has been kind to you in one of these ways. Whether they were the friends, the ones in the front row of your theater, whether they are in the dark, whether they are, the people bursting in and interrupting the show, they all can be seen as kind by virtue of the benefit we can receive from them. Try to feel a true connection to all beings through gratitude for all this kindness you have received. And we'll look at the Lam Rim teachings on cultivating bodhicitta, but the one technique that focuses on this idea of the kindness of others, really gets to that place of acknowledging that we should want to repay the kindness of others because we feel so grateful. And how do we repay it? Of course, by having thoughts of loving kindness towards those beings. So I'm going to go back up here to where we were in terms of, sorry if I'm making anybody dizzy by doing this, cultivating love for friends, enemies, and strangers. So again, you recall that meditation on equanimity, you recall the kindness of others in the way that we just went through, and then we wish those beings happiness in a similar way as when working with oneself. Saying such as what was above, may you be happy, may you be safe, free from harm and danger. May you have all that you need to be truly happy, to be peaceful, to be satisfied, whatever words work for you. And again, you can do it in graded stages, working with friends first, then pulling in some of the strangers, and then eventually, working with enemies. Obviously, we can't work with every single being because we don't know every single being. But the ones that we do know, it's good to work with as many of those as possible. And with strangers, it's good to bring in a number of people over time so that we feel quite comfortable generating thoughts of loving kindness towards any stranger we meet. And then eventually, of course, with any enemy. All right, then let me finish off this little instruction here, and then we'll see if there are any questions. Cultivating love for all sentient beings. This is sort of taking it out of those individual groups and being very large and vast. As I said, it's okay to do this, but don't make this your sole practice of just meditating on all sentient beings, because as I mentioned earlier, Lama Tsongkhapa advises that we will actually have problems when it comes to individuals if we haven't done work with individuals, rather than the collective whole of all sentient beings. So now we can do this by recalling their kindness in the following ways. First, that all your temporal happiness, the wealth, favorable rebirths, and so forth, come from the merit or the good karma that you generate, which is generally done in dependence upon helping and not harming others. This, of course, is a reality that we are embracing in Buddhism, is that karmically, everything that we have kind of comes from our actions towards others. Everything, that is beneficial to us comes from our actions towards others that are like generosity. When we engage in generosity towards other beings, we're creating the karma to receive resources. When we protect the lives of other beings, we receive the benefit of having our own life be protected from danger, illness, and so on. Everything that we do in terms of our behavior and our moralities that is favorable, done towards other sentient beings, ripens into one's own benefit. Karmically, others are a necessary part of creating the good karma for you to enjoy all the things that you have in your life. So once more, it's an acknowledgement that this is also a means by which others are intimately involved with your welfare. That stranger on the corner that you give some money to because they are homeless and need some assistance, they are a part of you creating the causes for your own future resources. In this way, our temporal happiness and well-being comes from them being a support for those actions. If you don't have those beings in your life, you can't create that karma. Also, what we looked at earlier, and when we talked about the strangers, all our temporal needs are provided at least in part by others. For example, our food is grown, processed, packaged, distributed, and sold by others. Some food we might be growing ourselves, and especially in these summer months when we have the opportunity to have warmer weather and be able to cultivate, a good vegetable garden or what have you. But nonetheless, a lot of what we have still, we didn't create it ourselves. And even when we look at those vegetables that are in our garden, we didn't completely create ourselves either. No doubt other people were involved in that. Even if we needed to, water that, we needed the water resources to be there. We needed people working in the water department and purifying water and what have you. There are a lot of people involved in helping us to have even the stuff that we use to grow our own food. And then the third is, of course, one of the ways that we frame this in the Mahayana tradition is recognizing that all of our own ultimate attainments are dependent upon sentient beings, because without them, we could never become enlightened. In the one section of chapter 6 of Master Shantideva's text that I'm teaching on currently, I'll be doing this on Monday night, actually going into these exact verses. The Shantideva points out how we often have this idea that we have the Buddhas as a great field of merit that we need to always be attentive to, making sure we do our offerings and supplications and what have you to the merit field, the refuge field. And then we have sentient beings, and we might think that somehow sentient beings are less worthy of our respect and attention than the Buddhas, because the Buddhas have all these amazing qualities, right? But they're both necessary for our path. You know, they're equal in that regard, because we need the instruction, the guidance, the kindness of the Buddhas in order to be on the path and follow the path. But we need sentient beings as the support for engaging in all the activities that help us to move along the path. If you don't have sentient beings who are suffering, you don't have the objects of your compassion, your kindness, your generosity. You don't have the objects of your bodhicitta, again, that you're all familiar with, but we'll be talking about a little bit more in the afternoon class tomorrow. Bodhicitta is the wish to achieve enlightenment for all of those beings. You need all of those beings. Lama Zopa Rinpoche often says that every being you meet is the source of all of your past, present, and future happiness. And that means every happiness that you experience all the way up to enlightenment is in some way indebted to that being. You know, if they are a source of that. That's because, again, all of our actions that create the positive karma that we experience in positive results, all of the things that we have in our lives that depend upon them, even our own progress on the path and our enlightenment, depend upon having other beings. They are as integral to our path to enlightenment as the Buddhas and the objects of refuge. So we need to, embrace beings with that idea. So when we're doing this meditation, that is this sort of third step, we've cultivated some, awareness of compassion for ourselves and understood that. And then we begin to think about friends, enemies, and strangers in those categories and generating some thoughts there. And then finally, cultivating compassion for all sentient beings in this very large, vast way. This is an important part of acknowledging that platform of all those sentient beings are necessary for you to become enlightened. If you exclude even just one of them, you can't become enlightened. It doesn't work that way. You need to have a heart that embraces every one of them. Therefore, every being is involved in your attainment of enlightenment. And of course, when you attain Buddhahood, you're there to benefit every single sentient being because you cultivated that understanding of the kindness that they were showing you by being a support for your development of compassion, loving kindness, bodhicitta, and so on. So every being is caught up in your welfare at that most profound level in terms of your ultimate attainments. Then cultivate immeasurable love to all sentient beings with the following prayer, meditating on each line. And of course, you can enlarge on this, as we saw with some of the previous, points on, may you be happy, may you be peaceful, and, so on. You can certainly do that. But, this is the prayer that we're using in the Mahayana tradition here to, encapsulate those thoughts. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. Again, that kind of strong sort of aspiration that this come to be, how wonderful. And then the prayer, the wish, may they have happiness and its causes. And then I myself will cause them to have happiness and its causes, elevating that to personal responsibility. And then finally, seeking the blessings of the Guru, of the Buddhas, so that we can achieve that. So that's kind of all the points that I had on loving kindness. We do have one more thing that I need to go through, and then I'll see if there are any questions. And that is, whoops, I don't want to go to Facebook, though. I'm not sure that that's always going to take. Sometimes when you do the screen share and you move around, it doesn't always show up. So let me go back to PowerPoint from here. Yeah, this is where we look at once more the far enemy and the near enemy. Recall that the far enemy is what is obviously completely opposed to generating love. And this is, of course, ill will or hatred or any kind of malicious intent. Cruelty, I guess, could be a part of this. So we often see cruelty associated with compassion. But anything that is directly opposed to thoughts of love, that will obviously be what we are counteracting most directly by generating love, and is quite obviously, something that we need to overcome. But we also have to be aware of the near enemy of love, thoughts of loving kindness. And that is what we call selfish affection or attachment. You know, I was alluding to this earlier, so many of the complications in our intimate relationships with others, our relationships with people who are our friends and so on, they are mixed. We have a mind of love that genuinely cares about them, that wants them to be happy, but we also have selfish attachment. And so people might sometimes confuse that combination of sort of a selfish concern for the other person, that we want to take care of them because they're taking care of us, that we're attached to them being in our lives and we keep doing what we do to please them so that they can keep pleasing us. I mean, this is a distortion of love. It, once more, might have some genuine loving thoughts that are underneath the surface, but because it's operating from that place of self-centeredness and wanting one's own needs to be taken care of, it's not going to be genuine. It's not actually going to be hitting the target. So recall that again with these near enemies, where just little tweaks and distortions that can somehow make them go astray. So don't fool yourself into thinking that with all of these people that are in your front row that you have some sort of perfect love with already. I was mentioning earlier about how they are kind of easiest to work with initially because we do have thoughts of love towards them. But I would guess that with most of us, we still have a lot of selfish concern involved in that. We still care about those people until, again, they show us that they don't care about us. And then we're happy to move them, boot them out of the front rows and let them go find a seat somewhere else, because we have selfish concern in regard to that. Now, again, people will move of their own accord around our theater. The point is, once more, is that we want to be able to have not just that equanimity, but as we're pointing out here, thoughts of loving kindness towards every one of them that aren't conditional, that aren't based on where you're located in my theater. They're based on, the fact that you are a being who wants to be happy and that you deserve happiness, as Kathleen MacDonald pointed out. So this is the whole kind of gist of these thoughts of loving kindness that we want to be able to send out to every single being and not make them contingent upon what those beings have done for us lately, or to what role they've played in our more immediate well-being. As I was pointing out by going through all the meditations on kindness, every being is involved in your welfare. And certainly when we look at it from the point of view of bodhicitta and our desire to become enlightened, every being is a support for that mind, and in that way a support for your attainment of Buddhahood, which is the fulfillment of your own well-being. And then, of course, the ability in that state to satisfy others, to be involved intimately with the lives of others and helping them to achieve their realizations. So let me see if there are any questions at this point about loving kindness, either at the level of self-love, at the level of loving others, in any of the meditations that I went through, the kindness of others. Anyone? So we're still about a half hour away, and I, as I mentioned, the other night, I really do want to make this a little bit experiential, to at least do some meditation together. So we have a choice. We can do a meditation on equanimity. We did just a very brief one on that when we started this afternoon, or we can do a choice on love. And I'm happy to do either one, whatever it is that you would prefer. Are there any requests? I'm taking requests. DJ Don is taking requests. No one has a request. Well, let's do it this way, because I'm actually hoping again that though there's a fair amount of material to cover remaining, I'm hoping that I can actually insert a meditation at the beginning of tomorrow. I think it's always better towards the beginning of like the day in the class. This is kind of late in the day to be doing meditation, especially with as warm as it is here, but nonetheless, I'm happy to do that this way. But what I'll do is I'll do the equanimity meditation now, and we'll do a form of that, bringing to mind some of these reasons and see how we do. And then in the morning, I'll lead with like a meditation on loving kindness, maybe not horribly long, but enough to give us a taste of that. And then we'll do our teachings on compassion. And then we'll see how the rest of the day goes, but maybe we can fit in another meditation somewhere in there. But all right. Okay, sounds good. I get a thumbs up. All right. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and just spend a few minutes in silence, giving ourselves a chance to sort of settle the mind a little bit. But again, keeping in mind that for most of us, it's a bit warm, perhaps, we're a bit sleepy. We had our lunch, and so we might even be kind of, I don't know, feeling a little full, a little heavy. So keep in mind that, that may be an obstacle, but nonetheless, do the best that you can to try to work with the breath in as attentive a way as you can. This isn't about relaxing and falling to sleep. This is about making the mind very sharp and focused by using the breath as a meditation object. And after a few minutes of this in silence, I'll lead you in a meditation on equanimity. So now let's begin with just a brief visualization of trying to imagine all sentient beings surrounding us, which might be quite challenging, but we can at least define some of the beings in a very specific way. First of all, think about the dear people of this life that you're already quite close to, who you consider to be your friends. In the space to either side and behind you, kind of there, backing you up, supporting you. You can think about your father of this life on the right-hand side, your mother of this life on the left, all the other beings that you feel close to, again, in that space to either side and behind you. Bringing to mind as many faces as you can. And then in the space directly in front of you will be the challenging people, the difficult people. Here too, we should be able to define those faces. And this may be, again, people that we do have in our lives that have harmed us or those we love. Or it could be people in the public, in politics or what have you, who have views that we object to, have engaged in behavior that we object to, who we consider to be very difficult people for ourselves. And then surrounding those two more defined groups are the vast quantity of strangers. And here we can just think about everyone being in a human form, just going out in all directions, completely surrounding you. And the first step is to consider the attitudes that you have towards these beings. And to make this even more specific, let's pull forward from these three groups, three individuals. from the group of the friends, pull forward the person who, again, you feel very, very dear to, might be the one you feel most dear to in this life, at this time of this life. And have them sit kind of like immediately in front of you. And then pull someone from the group of strangers. Again, we might have a hard time here because, especially these days, we might not even be seeing that many people, but nonetheless, you can bring somebody forward, maybe even someone you've seen on television that you don't know, you don't really have any strong feelings about. And then from the difficult people, pull forward one person there so that we can work with these individually and kind of understand how to generate an equanimous mind towards each of these three. So again, just take a moment to settle on the three people that will be the object of this meditation. And then, as I was saying, we want to first consider what our attitude is towards each of these. As you turn your mind first to the friend, can we see, the degree to which we have some attachment to that person? Yes, we do have some thoughts of loving care and concern, but we also are caught up in a web of attachment. Being greatly concerned about them because they care for us. They take care of us in a variety of ways. Then look at the attitude that comes up when you turn your gaze to the stranger. You bring them into your field of awareness. No doubt it's some measure of indifference, a sort of apathy even. We see that being, but we don't really know much about them. They've never engaged in any contact with us. So we just don't, it's kind of like a blank slate again, nothing really charged one way or another. And then thirdly, examine the difficult person. Here too, we should have a very obvious attitude arising. Just take a moment to investigate that, to see to what degree we are feeling some sense of aversion, anger, hatred, animosity, irritation, annoyance, wherever it falls on the spectrum. So just take a minute to get very clear about what these attitudes are that, again, are the target of this meditation. The attitude towards friends, towards the stranger, towards the enemy or difficult person. And recall also how these three attitudes of the kind of attachment, the indifference, the anger or aversion, how these are problematic. They have many disadvantages. Temporally, they make our lives quite complicated. But ultimately, they become major obstacles if we cannot address these and try to see all beings with an equal regard. We're never going to progress on the path. We're never going to achieve Buddhahood. So we want to be free of these biases, these attitudes, and generate that strong motivation to engage in the actual techniques of developing equanimity so that we can help there to be greater happiness in the moment, but also the happiness of enlightenment for both ourselves and others. So now I'll give you a little bit more time to do the analysis around impermanence. As you look at these three beings in the space in front of you, begin to acknowledge the changing nature of how they are manifesting in your life. That the friend very possibly was a stranger at one point, maybe even an enemy or difficult person, hard to say. And that the stranger could move into one of the other categories very easily. One day we're out and about and have an interaction with that person and form a new friendship, or maybe develop a difficult relationship with that person. And the enemy was a stranger at one point, no doubt, didn't even know that person, but they came into our lives and showed some difficulty. But that could change even. They could become a dear friend. And if we take into consideration lifetimes beyond this one, each of these three beings has been in every possible relationship with us as a dear friend, as a stranger, as an enemy, even our worst enemy. Every one of them has played that role. So what is the basis for these three attitudes of attachment, indifference, and anger? So spend a few minutes kind of investigating that on your own. And then let's go on to the second technique, which is to understand that others have a different perspective on the people that we consider to be friends, strangers, enemies. So that person who's your dear friend may actually be disliked by other people. We might think they're crazy because they don't see the good qualities of that person. But that is their perspective. Is our perspective right? Their perspective wrong? Just the fact that there is a different perspective should be evidence that we cannot hold these biased attitudes towards that friend, towards a stranger, because many strangers are very much loved or even despised by others. Many enemies are the same. You know, many people love them, some people don't even know them. Any being that we point to is going to be perceived differently by other beings. So what is the sort of solid foundation for having a mind of attachment towards our friends, indifference towards the strangers, hatred towards the enemy? So examine each of these three beings in that light of how other people might see them very differently. And once more, see if this helps to kind of loosen up these attitudes so that we can get to a place of equal regard. Then we go on to the third way that we can equalize our mind with regard to these beings, these three individuals in front of us, is that turning to any one of them, we can see that they're the same as each other and as ourselves in the following ways. The same in their fundamental desire to be happy and to not suffer. No difference. They are the same in terms of no matter what might be manifesting at a particular time, they have the same basic qualities. Positive qualities, some measure of love, kindness, compassion, and negative qualities, some anger, frustration, irritation, what have you. Every one of those beings is the same in terms of having both positive and negative qualities. And then lastly, one of the most important things, in ways that they are the same, is each of those three possessing the potential to develop their minds and their hearts fully. That they all have Buddha nature. And what is manifesting before us right now in terms of these three categories is just superficial. At their deepest level is the potential to develop themselves into the state of Buddhahood. So spend another couple minutes in silence reflecting on any one or more of these three ways that beings are the same. Try to see if you can, again, develop some sense of equal regard for all three of the beings in front of you. So seeing that we've done this for three individuals that are representative of these three groups, we should be able to have an equal regard for every other member of those groups because they also are the same, and these reasonings apply to them equally. Every one of those relationships subject to change, that other people will see them in different categories than we do, and that they're all fundamentally the same in those various ways, especially that they all have Buddha nature, that they all simply want to be happy and not suffer. So again, test your own equanimity right now by just looking to each of these three groups. You can maybe send the individual who's in front of you back into their respective group, seeing if you feel a sort of equal regard, not an apathy or an indifference, but actually a willingness to open your heart to each of them equally, seeing their worthiness, regardless of which category they are in. And then, having tasted a bit of this mind of equanimity ourselves, let's generate the thought that other beings have this equanimity as well, making this into immeasurable equanimity, ourselves and all beings abiding in that state. So let's, on the screen now are the 4 lines of the prayer of immeasurable equanimity. Let's recite each one and pause after each line and just reflect on that. First, this sort of, again, very vast aspiration or wish that this be so. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And just use your imagination to think about how wonderful the world would be if this were the case, all beings having this equal regard for each other. And we go on to the immeasurable prayer. May they abide in equanimity. I mean, really, really want this to happen. It's not just a wish, it's actually something we desire to come to pass. And then that third line that is about taking this responsibility to have this altruistic intention to do this. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. And feel what it's like to be that courageous in this thought. Think that I will do whatever it takes to place all beings in that state where they are free from these disturbing attitudes towards each other and are able to see each other with equal regard. And then seeing that we cannot accomplish this on our own, we need the help, the guidance of our gurus, of the Buddhas. You can visualize four-armed Chenrezig or whatever Buddha you wish, or your teacher, whatever works for you, and make this supplication so that you receive the blessings from them to be able to do this. Please, Guru Deity, grant me blessings to be able to do this. And visualize that from the being you visualized in the space above you, nectar descends down that enters the crown of your head, that completely fills you with everything that you need to know true equanimity yourself and to be able to help others to practice and actualize that mind. Really feel that you've received all the blessings of the gurus, the Buddhas. Okay, I realize, yeah, it's pretty compressed meditation, doing it in just 25 minutes or so. But again, you would probably be best to, when you're doing this on your own, to work with maybe one of the thoughts and try to really, examine that quite deeply and, stay in touch with that. But there's nothing wrong with going through all of them like we did and kind of getting a taste for them. But over time, you may find that one is more effective than others, as I mentioned. So any other comments, questions before we close today? Again, normally, like I said, I have done this as a weekend retreat, and there's nothing wrong with doing it in this format, but it's also nice when I do it as a weekly thing, and then you have the time to practice. So I'm hoping that this whole collection of papers doesn't just get put into a little folder somewhere and then maybe, looked at another year or two from now or something. You can actually take just parts of it and work with it wherever you feel you're at, wherever you think it might enhance your own personal practice, and then put it into effect very slowly, very gradually, because it's not not something that you're meant to digest all in one fell swoop and be able to actualize. So anyway, good. Well, it was great today. Let's go ahead and make sure we dedicate all this positive potential we've created so that we have the best possible results from our actions here today. So the two dedication prayers on the left we'll recite first. As I said, that first one is to make sure that all of this gets sealed and protected. The result of enlightenment is a never-ending result because it will always be there when we attain Buddhahood to help others to achieve enlightenment. So we're dedicating for that sort of inexhaustible results of complete enlightenment. And then, of course, all the other beings that will benefit from our being in that state. So let's recite that verse first. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And the second verse is all about this mind of bodhicitta that is this product, the final product of all of what we're doing this weekend. The desire to be of the greatest benefit to others by becoming a Buddha ourselves. And so we want that to grow very deeply in our own hearts and in the hearts of others. But as I've been pointing out, especially wish this for those people who have power in our world, who are leaders in our world. How wonderful it would be if they operated from a place of bodhicitta. Be a totally transformed world, just like we talked about equanimity. If all beings were in equanimity, it would be an amazing place, right? Well, it's the same with bodhicitta. If at least, some of the people who are very involved in putting policy together and doing things in the world that affect others, if they held this altruistic intention, the world would be so much better. So make that strong aspiration. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And then again, recalling the kindness of our teachers and our dependence upon them, we'll recite the two prayers on the right side of the screen, making strong prayers for our teachers as well as all teachers in the world to have good health and long lives, and for us and others to never be parted from perfect teachers. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And then, as usual, we'll also make personal dedications by bringing to mind in our own hearts those beings that whose situation moves us at this time, whether it be beings who have obstacles to having a good life, having the things that they need, and so on, whether it be beings who are experiencing illness, or those who have died or even might be dying at this time. We bring them all to mind and dedicate for their welfare so that they might be free from their suffering right now, immediately, that they may have all the conditions that will be conducive to help them to find true peace and happiness. And may all beings find perfect peace and happiness through our efforts here today. Wonderful. Thank you all so much again. This has been great. You're all doing good at staying attentive and alert and engaged. I know it's hard on these Saturday afternoons, weekend afternoons, especially in the warm weather, but I appreciate everyone hanging in there for that. So good. So again, we'll start at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And as I said, I'll do a short meditation on loving kindness and generating that as part of our setting our motivation for tomorrow. And then I'll go into the teachings on immeasurable compassion, and then immeasurable joy, and then bodhicitta. And we'll see what else unfolds for tomorrow. So good. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dawn. It's wonderful again.